Duncan, so good to see you, mate. Thanks so much for joining me on Perko's podcast all the way from the UK, where your lovely wife, Debbie, has just slipped out the door to head to the hospital, and she serves as a nurse in the medical field. And we are so grateful. Obviously, the entire planet is so grateful right now for people like Debbie serving on the front lines as we, all of us, try to flatten the curve of this global pandemic that we're finding ourselves in. So thanks for being on my podcast, and make sure you please pass on our thanks to your wife for all that she's doing to serve the community there. How are things in the UK right now? I'd like to know, because we are in the middle of this global pandemic. How are things right now in the UK on, what is it? It's April 13th there. How are things going, or the 14th?
Well, it's great to be here, Jason. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I've never been more proud of my wife. I mean, she does a great job. She works in an ITU, intensive care unit. And I've never been more proud of the fact that she calls it a war zone. It's crazy there at the moment, as you can imagine. So she's doing extra shifts there, coming home exhausted. But we've been in lockdown now for a month, and they're talking about it being another 3 to 4 weeks as well. So just like you guys, it's people are coping with it in all different ways. Some people are thriving, other people are really struggling, losing jobs, worried about their health, can't contact family members. So yeah, Debbie's just shot out to a shift, and my 3 boys are upstairs fast asleep. So the only friend I've got with me this morning, I'll show you.
Yeah, okay, go for it. You've got a friend with you, which is really helpful in times like of isolation.
That's my only friend. She goes everywhere with me. Say hello to Jason and everyone on the podcast.
That's Duncan's beautiful dog, Summer, is it?
Yeah, that's Summer. Yeah.
And is Summer a Cocker Spaniel?
She is a Cocker Spaniel. Good spot. Have you got a dog as well?
I don't have a Cocker Spaniel. I have had many dogs. Our family are massive fans of Schnauzers, and we currently are in the market for getting a Schnauzer, because we had to leave our second Schnauzer back in the US when we moved back to Australia about 9 months ago. So
I bet you FaceTimed them, haven't you?
Oh, we have FaceTimed our dog many a time, especially my kids. They love FaceTiming. So we're in the middle of this pandemic, Duncan, and you know, earlier in the podcast, people would have heard a little bit of your background, but you're the director of a network of churches in the UK called the Further Faster Network. And like the network that I serve with here in Australia, the Irresistible Churches Network, we're trying to help churches create churches that even people that don't normally go to church would love to come to. And recently, the church, like many industries, it's not the only industry, but like many industries, I think they have gone through, the church at least, has gone through the most extensive shift in methodology, perhaps in church history. I don't know of any other time in church history where there has been a global methodology shift like we've seen in the last month, with churches being forced to go online and to do services and ministry via digital platforms, as opposed to inviting people into their buildings like they've done literally for hundreds, and especially in the UK, thousands of years. They've invited people into their buildings. So with this monumental shift, I came across an article that you wrote, a couple of weeks ago now, called "The View from My Sofa." And it sparked in me a question that is actually a question that a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, a guy named Jeff Henderson, who pastors a church in Atlanta, Georgia, called Gwinnett Church. He asked this question several years ago: what's it like to be on the other side of me? And he shared that question in the context of leaders and parents asking that question of people that they're around on a regular basis. Hey, it's a great habit to get into great thing to get into the habit of asking, what's it like to be on the other side of me? And when you wrote this article, The View from the Couch, or The View from My Couch, about online church, all of a sudden it dawned on me, we should be asking as church leaders, I think, what's it like to be on the other side of me, meaning our online church experience? And you've been asking that question now for a couple of weeks. What have you seen as far as formats of churches doing church online? I mean, you've watched dozens, like I do, churches doing their services online. What are some of the formats that you've seen happening over the last month or so since this crisis broke out?
It's a great question, Jace. And you know what? For me, it's been a fantastic experience, because normally there isn't the drive or the opportunity to see what other churches are doing. But now everybody's negotiating this new world. How do we do this well? How do we do this to maximum effect? So you can nose in at everybody else's service. So I've been doing that. And I've counted up over the past 4 weeks. I think I've seen around 100 services.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I've scrubbed through a few long worship sets and other bits and pieces, but I have seen about 100 different services, because I'm fascinated at how people, like you say, this massive shift in methodology of the church. How's the church coping with this? And you know what? My overriding sense is I am really proud of the church.
That's
I mean,
great,
some of it isn't great. Some of it is a little bit boring and a little bit rough around the edges, but they're standing up and they're trying to bring hope in the best way they can through a digital platform. And it's new for so many people. So I've been really proud of the church. And I know for so many pastors, this is hard. We know what to do to stand up on a Sunday and preach. It's really hard to do something on your iPhone, sitting in your kitchen. It's really difficult. But out of all these churches that I've seen, before I talk to you about formats, it's raised 6 huge questions for me in all these different churches. Let me run through them real quickly. First one, here's the first question. If people are sat at home, this is about the end user. If people are sat at home on the sofa and they're watching you on a TV screen, they're probably sat in their PJs and they've got a coffee in one hand and a bowl of cornflakes in the other hand. Does the format that we're using work best for them on a sofa?
Yes.
We know the format for a Sunday morning when they're sat in a row in their Sunday best. I phoned up a few of my friends who are end users who sit on the sofa, are Christians, and they're watching church. And I've said, what is it like for you? And honestly, lots of them say, well, you know what? When the music comes on, that's my chance to go put the kettle on, because it's kind of weird. It's some guy in his kitchen with a guitar. And I can't sing along with the family, and we do in church, but not sat on the sofa, So I go and make coffee there, or I check my emails. Other people say, well, that's the time I scroll through Instagram. So the first question is, if people are sat at home in their PJs, what's the best format for us to reach them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yep.
It is. The second question is about new people. What if they find us online? And never before in our history have people been looking for a sense of hope, and they've been turning to the church to find that. And if they find us online, what's the best format and the best content that will make them want to stay to the end of our video and maybe even come back for the next one?
Yeah.
So the third question, and it relates to something I've just said, are unchurched people happy to sit through a 20-minute worship set before you get to the main point?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because if they're stumbling across your video, or if they've been invited by a friend to watch it, say some friend of theirs has shared it with them on social media, do they really want to sit through 3 or 4 songs, which could take 15 to 20 minutes before you get to the message that you want to share for that day? That's a great question.
You were telling me earlier that you were preaching soon on a subject that was how to solve a problem that you can't solve. Yeah. And everybody's asking that question right now. And imagine if I turn up as an unchurched person saying, I don't know, I no idea who this Perko guy is, but I've got a problem I can't solve. And if he's going to give me the answer, brilliant. And I sit and watch the service and I get a 5-minute introduction by someone I don't know, then 3 songs by some guy in his garage, then a little video bump. And I'm thinking, I've been here half an hour and he hasn't even mentioned how to solve a problem. I'm done. I'm away.
Yeah. Could you imagine, Duncan, if you and I were trying to fix a bike, which I was actually trying to do the other day. I was trying to adjust the gears on my son's mountain bike. Imagine if we Googled how to adjust the gears on a mountain bike on YouTube or on Google or whatever. But we had to sit through 20 or 30 minutes of somebody talking about their bike shop or their repair shop and how great it was or whatever. And I'm like, I just want to adjust the gears on my son's bike. How do I scrub through until you start telling me how to do that? That's a great question. Yeah.
I just think as leaders, we need to ask ourselves a question of the end user. If the end user is an unchurched person, does the current format we're using help them to stick around to the end of the video and want to come back? And so it leads into my 4th question, which is, does worship as we currently do it work online? I mean, I'm like the next person. I love standing in rows, arms in the air with the drums loud and the singers singing. I love that emotional connection. But is there a better way to create that emotional God connection moment in a service online that kind of supports the main message? So does 3 songs or 4 songs, 20, 25 minutes as we're currently, does that work for an online audience? Or are
Yeah,
people
no,
going
that's
to
good.
do their emails or scrub through if they're watching online?
Yeah.
And the 5th question is, this is a biggie. Is a 60-minute service or a 75-minute service, or God forbid, a 90-minute service with a 30-minute preach, is that still the best way of engaging an audience that are sat on their sofa?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do. We do a service or an hour and 15-minute service, but can you still do something in 20, 25 minutes, 15 minutes that still has an impact but works for people sat on their sofa?
Yeah.
And the final question is about, think about our people for a minute, those that would call themselves the core of the church. Are they going to get bored with the same old every week online? Because they're sat on the sofa, they're used to watching on a screen, they're used to watching TV shows. And you're used to, if a TV show or a YouTube video doesn't work, you click off, or you click somewhere else, or you go to an on-demand box set on Netflix or something. But so will our people, they've got a level of loyalty towards us because they know us, but they're just one click away from some of the greatest preachers and greatest church experiences on the planet. So why wouldn't they go there? Why would they stay with you? They don't need to be loyal because no one's watching. You know, the pastor's not thinking, oh, I haven't seen them for a while.
Right.
So they could go elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, so
nobody's concerned about attendance.
No, exactly. No one's feeling the. So I guess what I'm saying, and all those 6 questions jumped out for me as I looked at all these churches online. And you know what it left me with? It left me with this feeling that if we're going to thrive in this online world, innovation like never before, it needs to be the center of everything that we do.
Yeah.
Because with all of our doors closed and our messages confined to YouTube videos and Instagram posts, we need a double dose of passion and beauty and fresh imagination. And maybe for us as pastors, it's hard to know where that stuff comes from. But that's where the creatives and the innovators and the entrepreneurs come in. Yeah. It's where the dreamers come in. We need to lean into dreamers who are going to honor the past, but they're not going to be bound by it. We need to lean into the artists who are going to somehow stop the scroll on Instagram and Facebook. We're going to need to lean into visionaries who'll take us beyond business as usual. We're going to lean into risk takers who won't give us what we out of church online, but they'll show us something we didn't even know we needed. So I just think more than ever, the church needs fewer leaders who are going to just appease their people and more leaders who are going to go beyond the usual.
Yeah.
So it's just a passionate plea for me to lean into those creators, because we need innovation if we're going to win online. So to your original question about formats,
yes,
I've seen 4, and the last one is really radical, but I'm telling you, it really works for this church.
Yeah. So talk to me about the formats, the 4 that you've seen. How would you describe those? Because I've seen, and I've put them into, I've seen, like you, hundreds of different online church experiences over the last month, and I've put them into some buckets. What are the 4 that you've seen? Okay.
The first one's, we've said it already, people who basically keep it all the same. It's an hour long. Yeah. Somebody does a welcome, somebody sings some songs. There's a little title package, a little video bump. The preacher stands in his lounge in front of an iPhone and speaks for half an hour. Yeah. There's maybe some kind of video song at the end. And some of these are done in the church building with no congregation. And I'm telling you, that's weird. When you're sat on the sofa, honestly, when you're sat on the sofa and the guy who's preaching is preaching as if there's a room of 1,000 people, and he's shouting at you through the TV screen or through your laptop or through your phone. And you're sat on the sofa thinking, why are you shouting at me? Yeah. Why are we not having a conversation? This is what TV's all about. Yeah. So a lot of people have kept it the same. Have you seen that? Have you seen just people cutting and pasting?
I have. I've seen quite literally, Duncan, people rolling a tripod into the middle of their auditorium that is now empty. And the only difference of anything they've done on a Sunday is that their band is just standing at least 2 meters apart. Yeah. It's the only difference. They're just not as close to each other, but they're using the same stage, the same group of people. It's the exact same format. And, for some, Duncan, there's an argument out there that with all the change that's going on, people are craving some level of consistency. And so I've heard some church leaders say to me, well, Jason, we want to be the constant in this epidemic or pandemic of complete change in people's lives. And so I hear what they're saying, but I've got a follow-up question. I don't want to dive into it too early. I hear what they're saying, but I guess my question for them would be, is that working though? Yeah. Because are your people staying online and watching the whole thing for 60 plus minutes, just like they would have if they were sitting in the pew on a Sunday or in a chair? Or are they scrubbing through it and they're actually only watching 10, 15 minutes of your message and they skipped all of the worship songs? I guess my question is, in light of your desire to provide some consistency, is that actually working? Have you got the feedback from your congregation to say, yes, we're all sitting through an hour plus service, just like we used to on a Sunday morning? That would be my question.
Yeah. And I think the human condition says that for most individuals, whether they're new to church or not, they want it to be helpful. Yeah. They want to come to a church service, whether it's in a building or they're watching it online, and they just want to feel a little bit better about themselves when they leave. They want it to help their everyday lives. And if you can church auditorium down the shouting down the TV screen, well, great, do that. But I don't think it works that way. The second format I've seen, which is fascinating to me, and I think this is the one that I would probably lean into. I've seen 2 or 3 churches do a 25-minute, almost podcast-like TV style format, where there's a quick grabby intro, and then there's you get to the main message kind of quickly, so right at the start, there's a grabby intro. The first 10 or 15 seconds really grabs. And then you're into the question, how do you solve a problem, like your question for your talk? How do you solve a problem that you can't solve? And then that's when they kick off into the main part of the message. And they might then finish with some kind of emotional song, or they might have the message as a conversation, like in a podcast, like what we're doing. Yes. Or they might part of the message might be an interview. I got to thinking, I wonder what my friend Jason thinks about that. And you cut Jason into the conversation. And then so they've looked at it like a TV style format, and that grabs me. That makes me want to sit on my sofa and carry on.
Almost a Jimmy Fallon-esque kind of experience. Yeah. A bit more talk show host. Yeah. Okay.
I've seen some churches, I don't know about what it's like in Australia, but there are lots of TV shows that are having to work with different formats now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's one particular big show in the UK on BBC TV called Have I Got News for You? Which is a panel show. It's a comedy show. They get 4 comedians on and they make comedy about the news. And there's an audience who laugh their guts out. And it's really funny. Everybody watches it. But all they've done is cut and pasted the same format. There's no audience. There are just 4 people on Zoom calls. And it's just not funny. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And yet Match of the Day, which is the big Saturday night football show, obviously they can't show any live football. But they've got legends like Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer, who's the top goal scorer in the Premier League. They've got those guys just telling stories about who they thought their best manager they played for, what was the best striker they played alongside. And it's gripping. They've changed the format completely. It's still the same audience, football mad people like me, but it's gripping. So I think we need to think carefully about the format. The other one I've seen, and I've talked to a few churches who are considering this, I think is quite an interesting thought. I don't know what you think about it. They're talking about taking your hour-long service and splitting it into 3. Okay. So taking the pastor's message that normally has 3 points and doing 1 point on Sunday morning, the next point on Tuesday, and the following point on Thursday. So church happens 3 times during the week, 20 minutes a shot each time. Maybe there's a song at each, but you're getting right into the point to start with. And I think that's quite an interesting concept.
Yeah.
As well. 20-minute bite, 3 chunks.
Yeah. Duncan, I haven't come across that in the sense of they're compiling an entire service into 3 segments. Obviously, I've come across a lot of church leaders who are trying to touch base digitally throughout the week with their congregations or their community. But I've not come across that. So that'll be interesting to see how that works for those churches that are trying to break up a regular Sunday hour-long service into 3 bite-sized chunks throughout the week. Have they got any feedback on how it's going, or are they just now starting it?
They're just now starting it because most churches just scrabbled. I think it's probably week 3 for most of the churches in the UK. And week 1, people just scrabbled around to do their best with what they'd got.
Yeah.
Week 2, they kind of built on it a bit. And now they've got through Easter, they're beginning to think, so what does work? And so they're beginning to think about how these 20-minute services might work. So it's all very brand new. Here's the 4th format.
Yeah, tell me about this one.
It's really radical and it's really working. It's a church in Atlanta. And they basically bagged the domain zoom.church.
Yes.
Which is
I've heard about these guys. I believe is it Perimeter Church?
Yeah, I think that's what they're called.
Yes.
The idea works, and it's worked for them. So basically what they do is they produce a 20-minute package with music and a message and, some high quality stuff. And then they appoint Zoom pastors from their church. And those Zoom pastors invite no more than about 20 or 25 people into a Zoom conversation. So there isn't one live service that happens on Sunday morning. So they'll gather 20, 25 people into a Zoom conversation, and they'll show the 20-minute package. And then for the next 40 minutes on Zoom, the 20 of them will just talk. How does this apply to us? What do you think about this? And people have been inviting their friends into it who found it a solace. They found it a really hopeful place. And these things are growing. So I talked to the guy who's been involved in it, and he said that when they started it, the first Sunday they did it, they got about 10% less than their usual attendance on a Sunday morning. The following Sunday, they got 10 or 15% more. And now 3 or 4 Sundays in, they're virtually doubling their attendance. And it's not just people who are skipping past and seeing it. It's people who are in a group. You can see their faces on the screen. They really are attending. They're watching the content and then talking about it together. And it really is working. He said to me, the problem is, if this is working better than regular physical church, what do we do when this pandemic goes away, which it will, and we're all back into our buildings again? Do we ditch this that's reaching more people than we've ever reached? Or do we go back to business as usual? And they don't know the answer to that, to be honest.
Well, I think, Duncan, that is a great segue into asking the next question that I wanted to ask you in the podcast. I wanted to ask you, at the end of the day, you've heard this business slogan before. You've probably heard this axiom. The system you're currently using is perfectly designed to get you the results that you're getting.
Yep.
And so if you look at online church, you're going to see that whatever style of online church or format, however you want to call it, whatever you're currently using is best designed to get you the results you're currently getting. So for this church in Atlanta, or any church for that matter, I guess the question really is, are you happy with the results that you're currently getting? And if you are, then don't change the system. But if you're not happy with it, then I think you've got to reimagine what you're currently doing. But I do think, Duncan, one of the challenges for a lot of church leaders is possibly that they're not sure if they've ever really articulated the result that they would like to get. They've never defined, well, what is the win, or what is the goal for our Sunday service, or our online service for that matter. So should churches be looking at redefining their win for Sundays in light of the fact that it's moved from a building to digital? Or should they just stay the course with the same win and goal that they had when they were able to meet in a building?
That's a fantastic question. And I think it's a question that lots and lots of pastors in the UK are asking. How do we know we're winning online? Are we winning or losing? Take it back a stage. You would know this, Jason. As a leader, clarifying the win in every situation of church life, every level of church life, is absolutely crucial. Because if you don't, people make up their own win. You know, if I said to you, Jason, I'm your pastor, I'd love you to serve on our meet and greet welcome guest services team. Would you be up for that? And you say, yeah, sure. And I say, great. See you next Sunday. Be wonderful. Just greet people in the car park as they come in. but I haven't made the win clear to you. And if I turn up next Sunday and I see you've got a t-shirt on that says turn or burn, follow Jesus or go to hell, and you're kissing people as they come in because you've read in the Bible that we should greet one another with a holy kiss, and some of your kisses don't look particularly holy, and then you're giving everybody a big black Bible as they walk in because it's the word of God they need more than anything else, I pull you to one side and say, Jason, that's not how we do it around here. But I haven't clarified the win. You've just made up the win for yourself.
Yes.
And you're upset because you think, I thought that was the best way to do it. So we know we've got to clarify the win at every level of church life as a leader. And I had this Zoom conversation with a pastor a few days ago, and he asked me this question. He said, how do I know I'm winning as a pastor? Which is a great question.
Yes.
What's the win for me as the overall leader of the church? And I thought about it. I thought, it's this. This is what it feels like to win as a pastor. It's when your team, all right, from the longest serving staff member to the newest serving volunteer, it's when your team are all aligned, not just around where you want to go, but around how you want to get there.
Yeah. I had to define that, pastoring for a number of years. I had to finally come to grips with the fact that I had never defined or clarified exactly what my win was in my role, but I had to, come to finally do that, or else I would be aiming in the dark and trying to figure out what I was doing every day differently. And I came to the final conclusion, the same conclusion as what you did, Duncan. I said, if everyone, our staff, our volunteers, every person is all completely aligned around our mission, vision, and strategy, then I think I'm doing what I'm called to do as the lead pastor.
And I'm so glad you included the word strategy there, because a lot of leaders will say, yeah, everyone knows our mission.
Yeah.
But if you don't get people's feet lined up and aligned behind the strategy of how you're going to get there, then people are going to make that up for themselves, and it's going to be chaos. Yeah. Again, it's a bit like if you and I say, hey, it's going to be a lovely day tomorrow, let's go to the beach. We've agreed our mission, we're going to go to the beach tomorrow. But my strategy is we go in the afternoon because it's quieter, and we go in my car because then we can take some stuff and leave it in the car if we need to. Whereas your strategy is, no, we go in the morning because that's when it's not too hot, and we'll go by bus because we haven't got to bother with parking. So we're both clear on the mission, but we're unclear on the strategy, and it causes confusion. So I think when you're winning, when everyone's feet's lined up behind where you want to go, your mission, but they're also lined up behind how you're going to get there, your strategy. So a good leader will clarify for everybody in church, will clarify the win for an online service on a Sunday and get everybody's feet lined up behind it. And for me, go on.
I was going to ask, Duncan, is it possible that the pandemic came upon us so quickly and we were forced to get all of our services online and to move everything to a digital platform? Is it possible that we didn't take the time to clarify the win of this new methodology of doing church online? And is it possible that we didn't take the time to clearly articulate and communicate that win, whether it's the same or different to what we were doing before, but we didn't take this opportunity to use this change as a way for us to clarify that for our people?
And you're absolutely right. And quite understandably, because it was panic stations, all hands to the pump. We've got to just get something up there. So I can fully understand that. But it's never too late, is it, to have a Zoom conversation with everyone in your church, or a group of Zoom conversations, to invite everyone on your mailing list to join you in bunches of 20 or whatever, or 30 for a Zoom call, and be on the same Zoom call Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and say to people, look, I just want to define what we're trying to do online for you. Because if you don't do that, that's when you get everybody sharing their opinion. Why can't we have deeper worship and more worship? And then someone else says, why do we have all this worship? Why can't we have less? And then someone says, can the pastor do his deep teaching again? And someone else says, can the pastor do a shorter sermon, please? And everybody's got their ideas because no one's clear about what the win is.
Yeah.
And for me, I can't get away from this. I've pastored churches for 25 years, and I can't get away from the win being something around reaching disconnected, unreached people. Andy Stanley brilliantly, doesn't he? He brilliantly says the gravitational pull of all churches is towards insiders. And he's absolutely right. Left to our own devices, there's something that pulls us towards us and towards the connected and the already convinced. And this is a brilliant opportunity for the church to reach the outsiders, people who are anxious right now about their health and their jobs and their futures and their pensions, and they're looking for a sense of hope. And an online church gives us a unique opportunity to take away all those barriers to attending church. There aren't any barriers. There's no, all the barriers of, will I get a parking space, and what time does it start, and how do I have to dress, and what happens if someone asks me for money and I don't want to give it, and all that's gone because I'm just sat in my PJs on the sofa. The barriers have disappeared, and it's a great opportunity for us to do this. So I would say, make the win for your services about helping people find and follow Jesus, and I think it could become the church's finest hour. I really do.
I absolutely agree with you, Duncan. I absolutely agree. And even for somebody that's maybe listening to this podcast and they're going, hey, well, that's not exactly the win for our particular church. That's fine. I mean, I don't think it's fine personally if you're not including those that are outside the faith coming to faith in your win. But at the end of the day, I think every leader needs to clarify the goal so that they can design and create their online experience to at least get them to that goal. I would so much appreciate it if they would include the person that's not in the club yet, that's not in church yet, in their goal. But even if you don't, and that's not a part of your overall win, at least clarify your win so that you can design your format to get you the result that I think you are aiming for at the end of the day.
Yeah. So and I love how you put it earlier on. If you're happy with the results you're getting, then know why you're getting those results and keep doing it. But if you're not happy, if you're not seeing people saved and baptized and your church growing on a regular basis, maybe you need a different system. Maybe you need a different strategy. And the courageous leader is the leader that stands up and says, this isn't working, is it? We need to think differently if we're going to continue to reach and engage new people and see our church grow and not die.
So Duncan, across the globe, prior to this pandemic, I would say in most countries around the world, not all countries, but most, especially westernized countries, there was a steady decline in church attendance happening across the entire planet. Now, I've just read recently that because of the pandemic, more than 50% of churches are seeing an increase in attendance at their services, which I think could accidentally cause some pastors to say, well, we've gone online and now our attendance has gone through the roof because we're measuring or we're looking at all these people that are viewing our services online now. And they might be saying, well, I'm getting the result that I'm looking for. I'm getting the result that I'm looking for. And so why should I change anything? I think though, you just said something. If we're just getting people to view our service, but we're not seeing people actually engage, get baptized, have their lives transformed, get into a community group, start serving on a regular basis in their community. If we're not seeing that engagement, I guess I'm wondering, are we actually measuring the right thing? Because we're seeing 50% of churches increasing their attendance right now because of online church. But are we at the end of the day actually measuring the right thing? And what are you seeing that helps to measure the right thing during this time?
Jason, this is a brilliant question because I've got to be careful here. I don't think we are seeing a 50% growth in attendance.
Yeah.
YouTube lies to us because, when you put a YouTube video up, underneath it says the view numbers.
Yes.
And you look at the view numbers. I mean, we've all put YouTube videos up and you go, wow, that's huge, So I saw a pastor friend of mine who did a little Instagram post to his church, and he said, we've been online for 2 weeks now, and normally we get 250 people come to our church on a Sunday. Our services got 900 views each service. We're seeing revival. This is great. And I called him up and I said to him, have you looked into your YouTube analytics? And he said, well, what's that? And I showed him how to do that. And you just go into your little studio section there, and it tells you not your view numbers, but your view time, how many people watched for how long and where they scrubbed over bits and pieces. And once he did the analytics on it, which takes seconds and it's obvious, you can see it in front of you, it seemed that most of those 900 people were there for less than 2 minutes. And in fact, he was getting less people attending that normally came to church on a Sunday, because people were logging on and going, what is this? And logging away again, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I heard recently, Duncan, a church of many thousands of people. In fact, I think they had something like 6,000 or 9,000 views on their online service. But when they did the analytics, they actually had an average watch time of 11 seconds,
wow.
which tells you that thousands of people were clicking on and seeing what it was and then immediately clicking off. And so what should we be looking for then? If your pastor friend who says, hey, celebrating 900 people viewing is really kind of being deceived in what people are actually doing when they get onto his service, what should we be looking for instead?
So this is really helpful, isn't it? Because it gives us something to aim at. You know, if we can plan our services in such a way that's going to increase the view time, which is basically about audience retention, how long they're going to stay with us. And it's also going to be a plan to increase connection, that people stay with it. So this Zoom church in Atlanta, their connection levels are through the roof.
Yes.
I mean, people are genuinely connecting for good portions of the time. So if you make your win on a Sunday about increasing view times and increasing connection, and how do we know whether someone's connected or not? I think it's about how many times they like and how many times they share and how many times they comment on the stuff that we put up. Not about how many views we get, but how many likes, shares, and comments we get. So how many people saw your church online is not the key measurement of winning. It's how long people watched and how they engaged with the service that's the important kind of metrics.
It would almost be like, Duncan, a church saying, well, we've had thousands of people drive by our church on a Sunday morning and they saw our building for 11 seconds. And so we've increased our attendance. It's almost a similar comical thing to think that somebody just viewing you for 11 seconds as they drive past you on the road on a Sunday morning has attended your church. And yet in some ways we're kind of patting ourselves on the back as church leaders because somebody's clicked onto a YouTube channel for a second and then they've jumped off. So Jason, what does it look like? What does it look like for people to participate during the service then? What the likes, the comments, the shares, what are some things that you think actually help to encourage people to do that?
Yeah, and your analogy of driving past church and just looking at the sign outside and counting that as success is a brilliant analogy. Just before I get onto this, it's again a great question about participation in the service.
Yeah,
I think if you're going to be successful online, you've got to find an answer to questions like this. If the average YouTube video is 4 minutes and 20 seconds, does a 60, 70, 90-minute service still work? You have to answer that question.
Yep.
And the second question, if the call to action comes after, a 5-minute introduction, 20-minute worship, title package, 30-minute sermon, how many people have we lost before we get to the main point?
Yeah.
And according to YouTube, just like you said, Jason, according to YouTube, the major switch off moment for most of their videos is the first 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And so you've got, as a pastor putting together a service online, you've got to think about that first 15 seconds. And so many of these churches I've been to, nothing's been scripted. And so you just get some random guy saying, oh, we're online. Oh, yeah. Hello, everybody. We normally, and it's like, oh, God, I'm done. I'm gone already, And so, and the final big question, which is a tough question, that you have to answer is this: how do we program a service to increase watch time, to increase the analytic of watch time? And what if the audience, this about audience retention, what if the answer to that is, well, we have to program our Sunday church totally different to a regular Sunday in our building? Yeah. How would we feel about that?
Yeah.
Because I think,
if though, Duncan, if you're willing to really define what is our win for our online service, then I think your first step is to define what is that win. The second step then is, okay, are we willing to abandon everything to get to that win? Are we willing to rethink? Are we willing to go about doing things completely differently as long as we get to that win? And that's the question you're really asking. And somebody's going to be brave enough, and I believe that people are already doing it, that are brave enough to say, hey, we can't just do what we used to do and put it online. we've got to rethink the whole thing in order to get to this new win.
And it takes courage to do that for a leader, but we know that leadership is about courage. And if you take your people with you every step of the way, if you put them together on some Zoom conversation and say, listen, we're redefining the win for an online audience because it's very different and it's going to be this because we think we can get better results.
Yeah.
And I think people will walk with you. I really do.
I do too. So talk to us about participation, because one of the things that I've noticed, my own experience of watching church online by myself or with my family, is there's a lot of spectating. What does it look like to actually have people watching your service online participate? You know, when the worship leader asks them to stand up and sing along with them, and they stand up and walk over to put the kettle on. They forgot the sing along with them part. They just stood up and went and put the kettle on. What does it look like to get people to actually participate? Have you seen anything that's been effective?
Yeah, I've seen a few things. I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this. I'm just sharing from what I've seen, really. So whether you choose to stream on YouTube or Facebook, if you made YouTube your front door, your hero product in all that you're doing online at the moment, if you made it your place where unchurched people would come and find a true picture of who you are, whether you stream that on YouTube or on Facebook, here are some of the things that I would do. I would build an online participation team. I would call 20 or 25 people before the Sunday service and say, I'm recruiting you. So I'd call you, I'd say, Jace, I'm recruiting you to be part of my online participation team. And it means when it comes to the chat on YouTube or Facebook, these are the kind of questions I want you to ask. I want you to genuinely foster a relationship with people who are making comment. And so when people arrive, there are 25, 30 people already chatting. It feels like I'm able to join a conversation. And if people live online, unchurched people, they're used to online conversation. They're used to adding to blog posts and chats and comments. That's what we do these days. In fact, lots of our churches, we've sacked, obviously, furloughed our guest services team, our welcome teams, meet and greet teams, because there's no church. But we are still having church. So why don't we employ them to meet people and greet people? And why don't we employ them to say, why don't you stick around afterwards and we'll have a conversation? Why don't we employ them to run little 10-minute, this is what it means to connect with us conversations after the service online?
Yeah.
Why not ask the pastor or the preacher that Sunday, why not ask them to hold a Facebook Live or an Instagram Live Q&A right after the service? If you want to ask Jason some questions about solving problems that no one can solve, Jason's going to be on our Facebook Live page for 45 minutes afterwards. If you got questions, you can ask, or he's going to be doing Instagram Live or whatever.
Most of the pastors are pre-recording a lot of their content for Sundays anyway. So this could become the new opportunity for really pastoring people on a Sunday, is to say, hey, I'm not actually preaching on Sunday morning because that was pre-recorded during the week. Sorry to any of the pastors out there that we've now just, blown the whole show for you guys. But most of you are not actually preaching on a Sunday. And so this is a great opportunity to be pastoring and shepherding people right after the service is aired.
That's good. That's absolutely brilliant. And the other thing, one other thing I've seen other churches do and do really successfully is they've realized they've got some experts in their church that could be helpful to people. So one church in particular, they've run these Zoom webinars and invited people into these Zoom webinars. So you've got people who are GPs or doctors or nurses, and they're running healthcare Zoom webinars. The Sunday service is pointing people towards, if you want to know how to keep your family healthy in this pandemic, you've got everyone's homeschooling. So you've got some homeschooling people in your church, some educationists that can run these kind of webinars. Maybe you've got business people in your church who can help small businesses who are struggling to know what to do next, just to have a conversation. Maybe you've got, everyone's struggling with budgets and trying to get food from supermarkets. So maybe you've got some people who are great chefs, great cooks, who can say, this is how you could run a family meal for a week on no more than $25. And it's the kind of thing where your people would love it, but your people would find it very easy to invite your unchurched friends into. And if you use your Sunday morning YouTube service as a signpost towards that connection point, I think that could be a really huge win for churches.
Yeah. So it's really taking a look at that Sunday morning service, Duncan, just like you may have done in a physical location, now in a digital location, and saying, how is this a stepping stone to help somebody take a next step in their faith journey, no matter what that looks like? How do we leverage that because of the expertise that we have in our church, invite people into an environment digitally that could then be a stepping stone towards them finding community in your local church?
Yes. The problem is, if I could stop pastors doing one thing, it would be this: whether you're physically in a church building or we're doing services online, every pastor, even the greats, do this. Every pastor stands up on Sunday, be it online or be it in church, and they'll say, hey, thanks for being with us. Really glad of your company. Can't wait to join you back here next Sunday.
Yeah.
And you think, man, you've just lost the opportunity to connect with people for all the other 167 hours in their week. You know, in the UK, we've got a technology show on BBC TV called Click. It's been going for about 20 years. Brilliant show. And the host at the end always says, thanks for your company this morning. We live online and we'd love to engage with you there during this week.
Wow.
We live online. What a great statement. And then all the Instagram and Facebook and Twitter icons come up and how you can reach them. You know, as pastors, we spend all our weeks thinking about that 1 hour on a Sunday. What if we stopped and thought about the other 167 hours? And people are used to engaging with organizations digitally more than physically these days. Tell me, Jace, when did you last go into a bank? None of us go into banks anymore.
No, it's been a long time. Yeah.
You know, we're used to taking next steps online. And so we need to leverage that and not see social media. And so many pastors, again, they see social media as a bandwagon that they're supposed to jump onto, or another task they're supposed to perform. But what if you saw it as actually a place for discipleship? As much as a small group is a place for discipleship, what if you saw your Instagram page as a place for discipleship?
So Duncan, I had a guest on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, a good friend of mine, Ray Pritchard, and he does an incredible amount of ministry via social media. Just brilliant. In fact, if you want to go check him out, Dr. Ray Pritchard at Keep Believing Ministries uses social media in a great, great way. And he said to me, he said, Jason, Paul in the first century went down to, and I'm going to butcher this because my first century Greek is not that good, but he went down to the agora, which was the marketplace. And the reason he went down to the agora, the marketplace in Athens, is because that's where the people were.
Brilliant.
And I love what Click, the BBC show, says. We all live online, so we'll see you online. We all live online. That's our marketplace. That's our agora. That's where people are at. So why would we not wrap up our Sunday service and say, hey, thanks for joining us. I'll see you online, because everyone's going to be online during the week anyway, including us. It's a great point. Great
and
point.
If you want some specific environments where, so if you want to help people take a next step in becoming Jesus followers, there's no reason why you can't do Alpha and you can't do Starting Point and those kind of, Christianity Explained or Explored or whatever. There's no reason why you can't do those kind of groups with Zoom or Google Hangouts or Microsoft Teams or House Party, whatever. You can gather people together and still help people take a next step of faith. And again, the difficulty with Alpha is you've got to come to someone's house and have a meal, and it's, there's a barrier there. But if you join an online Alpha group, then the barriers are taken away.
The good news is, Duncan, both, at least I know, Alpha and Starting Point now have an online version because of the pandemic, or probably even before that, which now makes it super accessible for people. This has been fantastic. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's one church I know that has at the end of their online service, they've got a little 45 to 60-second next steps video. And so when the service finishes, that's what finishes all the time. If you want to take a next step, here's how you can do it. And if we were just to create that, this is your next step with us. This is how you can do it. I think that would be really helpful. Yeah.
This has been a fantastic conversation, and we've got more conversations like this one coming up on the podcast over the next couple of weeks. We've got some more guests coming on, Duncan, that are talking about some similar things, not the exact same thing, but some similar things. One of the things that is a kind of a feature of the podcast, or a part of our DNA, is this whole idea of soul care. One of the things that I've been most concerned about during this pandemic, especially for church leaders, but leaders in general, no matter whether you're leading a family or leading a business or just leading yourself, I'm concerned that because of this massive shift and the scrambling that has been going on, that it's possible, I'm not saying for everyone, but it's possible we've traded one type of busyness for another type of busyness, and possibly we're even busier as we're trying to figure out what's next and how do we do things well and how do we do things effectively. And in so doing, we lose sight of taking care of ourselves as leaders and making sure that our own souls are healthy. And one of the things we hope to do by bringing this podcast to people is to make sure that people are reaching both their strategic goals, but also the goals that they have for their souls and making sure that they have a healthy soul. So I guess I'd love to ask you, Duncan, what are some of the rhythms and practices personally that you try to maintain, even in the busyness of a season like this, that help to keep your soul healthy?
I'm so glad your podcast asks these questions. There are so many podcasts out there that just say, here's how to get the strategy right. Here's how to get your leadership tone right. And so few include this line about how do we keep ourselves healthy and how do we keep ourselves on track. So thank you, Jason, for having the forethought to ask that and to continue to ask it. The problem is it cuts right to my quick. I don't know if I've got a good answer to that. And I don't know whether my rhythms are as healthy as they should be at times. And I think for me then, personally, I mean, there are some obvious ones that we know about, but for me, I think if I can know what gives me energy and know what takes energy away from me, then I'm winning with this. Because there are some things in life, in our leadership life, that give us energy, and we can end up doing it until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and actually we're energized. Yes. You know, to be honest, Jason, I could have this conversation with you for 4 or 5 hours and I wouldn't go away tired. I'd go away full of beans because this is really into the sweet spot of who I am. But if you were asking me to pour over budgets and things, administration things for 4 or 5 hours, it would kill me, you know? So I think
that's a great rhythm, Duncan, that you pay attention to. That I don't know if you're aware of this, but Saint Benedict had a rhythm and a practice at the end of every night. Some people call it an evening compline. Before he went to bed, he would ask what was the consolation and what was the desolation for his day. What he was asking was what brought life and what drained life from me. How was God speaking to me through something that was life-giving? How was God speaking to me through things that weren't life-giving? And I think that's a great practice. If as leaders, we were to reflect at the end of each day on what was God doing or saying to us that was life-giving and what wasn't, I think it's a great practice to stay healthy to do that.
Thank you for underlining that in red and making it more clear. I mean, just imagine, Jason, if we as leaders were to ask ourselves, what is it that I do that when I do it, it adds most value to my organization and it makes me feel strong?
Yeah.
What is it? Because as leaders, we get to put our hands to everything. And especially in this online world, we've become video technicians, editors, preachers, whatever, you know. But what is the one thing that I do that when I do it, it adds most value? Because I can do lots of things, but this is the one thing I do that adds most value to our organization. Yeah. And when I do it, it makes me feel strong. Yeah. Because if you're a really good communicator, a really good preacher, but you haven't got time to do that, so you end up doing loads of other things, the organization doesn't benefit and your soul gets depleted because you're leaning into things that aren't your primary strength. Yeah. So if you were to ask, if you figure that answer out for yourself and then ask 3 or 4 other people the same question, what is it you think that I do that when I do it adds most value to our organization? If their answer is the same as yours, you need to make sure that at least 80% of your time you're leaning into that. Yeah. And that doesn't become the 20% of your time.
So each leader could essentially finish this sentence: XYZ church, XYZ organization is at its best when I fill in the blank.
Brilliant.
When I am preaching, when I am leading, when I am doing the budgets, when I am whatever it is, and maybe even ask some of the team that you work with to say, hey, XYZ church or XYZ organization is at its best when can you tell me 3 things, finish that sentence for me to help me clarify what I do that brings the most life to this organization?
And it's not saying we negate our responsibilities to do other things. You know, we all have to put the chairs out. We all have to do the pastoral things we don't want to do. We all have to be in places we don't want to be at times. But when that becomes the dominant part of our diaries for long periods of time, that's when our souls get depleted and we run on empty.
Yeah.
But if that becomes the minor part of our time and we lean heavily into where we're strong and where our organization benefits, then everybody wins.
Yeah. Duncan, this has been so good. And like you said, I could hang out for hours, and we'll probably do it after the podcast anyway, but hang out for hours and chat about these things, because I'm so passionate about seeing people that are far from God come into a relationship with their Heavenly Father. Because just like I want to have a healthy soul, and I want every listener on this podcast to have a healthy soul, at the end of the day, we want people to know the Savior of their soul, the person of Jesus Christ. And we so badly want the church to make it super accessible for people to discover who Jesus is. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. Before we go, I want to invite you to let people connect with you online. So we've talked a lot about connecting with people online. How is it that people can best connect with you online if they wanted to get a hold of you, or if they wanted to sign you up to actually do a secret shopper of their online church experience? Would you be open to doing that for a church if they wanted you to evaluate their online church experience, be a secret shopper? What does it look like to connect with you?
I do that secret shopper thing for quite a few churches, so I'd be glad to do that. It goes back to this idea of having to be very clear about what your win is.
Yes.
But yeah, I'll be glad to do that. So people can email me, and all this will be in the show notes, I guess, but Duncan at furtherfaster.network. And they can find me at Duncan Banks on both Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah,
and so I'd love to keep the conversation going with anybody, and any help that I can be to people, I'm glad to do it. This is my sweet spot, and I love leaning into it, and it makes me feel strong. So I'm glad to do that.
And if you're a church leader or you're a part of a church in the UK and your church is looking to grow by reaching people that are not currently connected in church or don't typically go to church, I want to highly recommend that you connect with Duncan or connect with the guys at the Further Faster Network. I think they would be a huge help to you and your church and your ministry. Duncan, thanks for your time, mate. As always a pleasure. Thanks for hanging out.
God bless you, Perko.
Thanks, mate.